I'll also pin your. Okay. We'll basically just start off with you talking about your chemical engineering aspect of your life and how you got there and what education led you there.
Okay. Um, well, it's good to see you. I'm um, obviously in a different role now than I was when I was doing engineering, but um, I my background was a love of science and math in through high school, and we knew kind of early on in life that I wanted to probably do engineering or something similar. And so I went. And unlike many people who are interested in engineering, I enjoyed my favorite science class was chemistry. So as I was thinking about what I was going to do when I went to college, I thought, well, if I'm going to study engineering, chemical engineering might be the most interesting. So I went to college and I went to major in chemical engineering. And obviously, it's a engineering is a science and math heavy subject. You have to take math through calculus and then take advanced mathematics. But in addition, learn a lot of scientific fields, chemistry, physics, and then a lot of different chemistry as a chemical engineer, which is more than most engineers have to study. And then learning more specific chemical engineering um, functions, which has a lot to do with chemical reactions and understanding how to calculate how things react to create other products. Fluid mechanics, understanding how materials move and flow, um, and thermodynamics. Those are sort of the key areas within chemical engineering. So I don't know what you're going to ask me questions, I assume, but we can talk a little bit about what if you want to ask questions about what does a chemical engineer do, what is the difference between chemical engineering and other types of engineering, we can certainly do that.
Yeah, that was about to be my next question. If you could go ahead and explain kind of what a chemical engineering
What I
does.
usually do when I do this presentation or talk about it is I ask people, what kinds of engineering do you know about? What are the types of engineering that you've heard about, and do you know what they do in the real world? So besides chemical engineering, I assume you've heard of other types of engineering. What kinds of engineering do people want to chip in? What kind of engineering um, do you know about?
I'll just read the chat as it comes through.
Okay.
Chemical engineering is one of them.
Yeah, mechanical engineering is one. Um,
Personally, I've heard of civil engineering as well.
Civil, yep. So there's a lot of different types of engineering, and engineering is really about being able to take scientific principles and create products or um, do things that benefit the world and make things for people. And almost everything that you use had some engineering involved in it. And so, mechanical engineering has to do with structures and understanding the strength of materials and 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 also has to do a little bit with pressures and flows of materials. Civil engineering is about buildings and bridges and big structures and how to make those structures um, robust and safe and be able to survive earthquakes, for example, and other natural phenomena. Electrical engineering, someone just mentioned, electrical engineering has to do with designing circuits and electrical systems and how to and designing the computer chips and making sure that the right signals are getting from place to place within computers. That's electrical engineering. Other forms of engineering include uh, material science, which has to do with designing new materials and understanding the benefits of using different materials for different purposes. Um, Computer science, which is computer programming, but chemical engineering is a another form of engineering which has to do with make using chemistry to make different materials and different products. And there's a lot of different applications for chemical engineering. The some of the largest involve, for example, the making of household products like paints and things you use every day, like toothpaste and cleaning products and pesticides and all the and different chemicals that you might use. There's a large field of chemical engineering that has to do with making the oil and gas industry and converting oil into gasoline for use in all kinds of applications, primarily for cars and planes and vehicles, and then converting that into other materials that are made out of petroleum. But there's newer forms of chemical engineering that have to do with figuring out how to reduce pollution and understand the chemical reactions involved in keeping materials out of our waste stream, recycling plastics. There's a lot of different applications of chemical engineering. I worked in two particular chemical engineering applications. I worked for a few years at Clorox, and I'm sure many of you have heard about Clorox, which makes household cleaning products. Primary product from Clorox is bleach, but Clorox also makes other cleaning products that are used. There's toilet bowl cleaner, there's Tilex for cleaning showers and kitchens. There are detergents that are used for washing clothes and cleaning and cleaning other things. And they have other product lines as well. So I worked there on some of their product lines. And then I switched into working in the semiconductor industry and computer chips, because it turns out that computer chips are made by reacting chemicals on the surface of a silicon wafer to lay down wires and insulation to create small circuits that are that have millions and millions of transistors on them. And that's a chemical process where the different chemicals that make up those circuits are flowing into a reactor, settle on the wafer, and then more work is done to make a whole bunch of layers that create all the wires. And understanding how those chemicals flow into and onto the wafer, how they react on the wafer, and how to make sure that every single wafer has the same result is really a lot of chemical engineering. It has to do with understanding the chemical reactions that are involved and understanding the flow of liquids and gases, and make sure that you get flow that's uniform across the entire wafer. So I don't know if that's too technical or not, but that's what I worked on when I was in doing a chemical engineering job.
That's really interesting. Thank you. What made you want to switch from chemical engineering into more kind of community service political range?
Yeah, so I mean, on the side, in my whole life, I've always been interested in public service and doing things for the community and being involved in the community. So even while I was working as a chemical engineer, I was serving on various capacities and doing volunteer work. I served on a commission for the city of San Jose for a few years, and then I served on the school board for the Berryessa School District. And then really decided that even though I enjoy engineering, I really, really liked working with our neighbors, working in the community, and eventually decided that I would love to serve on the city council and do service full time. It's an unusual transition. Most people that are in engineering jobs don't make that transition. Also, the city of San Jose is, because it's a large city, has to be on the city council is a full-time job. But in other smaller cities like Milpitas and Sunnyvale and Santa Clara, they are part-time jobs. So you can serve on the city council and still have the other job. I could have continued to be doing engineering while also serving on the city council. But in San Jose, I decided to leave the engineering job and serve on the council.
All right. So what makes you love chemistry so much, as you mentioned your love for chemistry?
Um, So I I had a great teacher in high school. A lot of it comes down to what classes you have and what you learn when you're in high school. And um, I had my favorite teacher in high school was, a long time ago, a man named Mr. McClendon, and I loved that chemistry class. We, if you have a really good chemistry class with a lot of really interesting experiments and demonstrations, you see, fire and colors and your liquids changing color and understanding um, how that worked was really interesting to me. And that teacher just made me really, really enjoy the chemistry class. And that made me decide that of all the science that I took, chemistry was my favorite. So, so sometimes it often just comes down to whether you have a great teacher or not.
Yeah, I think the teacher really does play a big role in liking a subject. So did you
Yeah.
have any specific hardships while doing a chemistry engineering major?
Well, any engineering degree is a lot of work. It's high level classes, requires, having a deep understanding. It has a lot of really smart people around you, so um, you are, it can get competitive, obviously, just like it is in a lot of college subjects. Um, I don't know. I don't know what to say. I mean, if you like what you're doing, you can be successful at it. You have to really enjoy the classwork and the advanced subject matter. Um, but it's complicated. There are a lot of times when I didn't understand, what was happening, and it takes a lot of practice to really understand it. And the you have to stick with it. You have to be serious about science and understanding science. And um, it's I would say if you focused on it, you can succeed in any of the thing that you're really interested in.
Yeah, I agree that dedication is really important. And out of all the things you have done, which is your favorite and why do you find that more interesting, appealing?
I mean, it's pretty hard to say that anything's more interesting than what I'm doing right now as a council member. I get to work on so many different issues. I'm never bored. I'm never tired. Sometimes engineering jobs can be, like many jobs, can be a lot of the same thing day after day after day. But I found a lot of very interesting things in that work too. I mean, I look back at my years at Clorox. I was working on um, trying to figure out how to add materials to bleach to make it smell better, which is very hard because bleach reacts with other materials to create gases that can actually be poisonous. So you have to be really careful about the work you're doing. Working in a lab is really interesting. Doing experiments is really interesting. Then I spent most of my time in semiconductors doing computer work where I was simulating what was happening in the reactors. And working on cutting edge technology is always really interesting. What's great about, I think what's probably the best part of engineering is when you are part of creating something new and that leads to the development of a patent. Um, so I have about 12 patents in my life. That means I was part of the team that invented something new. And when you invent something new, you sign up to you sign up to um, to make sure that with the invention is registered with the government so that you are named as one of the people who came up with the invention, and the company that you work for has the sole rights to be able to use that and sell it to people. So I got one patent when I was at Clorox. I got about 10 more when I was working in semiconductors, and that's really interesting. Um, so I would say that obviously the work I do as a council member is really interesting as well. I mean, it's a very different kind of work, and there's a lot of pressure to make things better for residents in the community. But you can work on a lot of different things. I see a really interesting question um, about making a mistake. So I wanted to
Okay,
make
I
sure.
was gonna read that one next,
Oh,
but
okay.
I did
Yeah.
answer.
Um, so, obviously engineering is about trial and error you can make predictions and things that don't pan out, but you can also do things that can actually, cost money. I always tell the story. This is not something I was involved in, but um, there's a lot of math involved in engineering where you have to calculate things and make sure you got it right. And one of the famous stories out there is that the company JPL, which works with NASA to design satellites, had designed a satellite to fly to Mars. And when they launched, it didn't follow the path appropriately and actually got lost. And it was like, and that was $1 billion mistake because the satellite cost $1 billion. Turns out that the reason for that error was because when NASA was talking to the company, they had used the wrong units on one of the numbers, and so they used the wrong number because instead of, I don't know what unit it was, but it might have been um, you know, in a different pressure unit or a different temperature unit, and that caused the calculation to be wrong. So you have to do a lot of double checking. But the other thing is safety. So when I've worked in sometimes when I was working in a plant where something's manufactured, you have to be really safe and make sure that you don't release chemicals that can cause people to get sick or even kill people. That makes sure that when you clean tanks and other things that you do it following all kinds of safety guidelines. The biggest mistake I ever made was when I was using a mixer to mix solid materials together. At one point, pushed my hand in to sort of push some of the material aside, and the mixer was spinning, and my hand got stuck and pulled into the machine. Fortunately, it only caused it ripped open my hand a little bit and caused some nerve damage, but didn't do anything permanent. But I ended up in the emergency room that night because I didn't, I tried to do something fast and didn't use the right tools. And so, a lot of things you do can actually cause real problems with injury or health issues.
Yeah, I'm glad that you're okay
Yeah,
from
that one worked out okay. I mean, it was scary, but I've never forgotten that moment when I had to yell out and somebody had to come and push the button to stop the machine. So you have to always have people around you and be really careful when you're working.
Aside from chemistry, did you enjoy any other particular subjects that could have potentially led you to a different career if you had not met your teacher?
Well, first I'll say math was probably my favorite subject in high school. Um, and I was on the math team, which at that time was a group that competed against other schools to to try to win math competitions. And I really enjoyed math. I also, liked a lot of other subjects. I mean, I enjoyed learning about art history and literature and other things, but math and science were my favorites, and math in particular. But the thing I thought that I wanted to be when I was growing up was an architect. Um, I really liked buildings. I liked drawing buildings and seeing buildings and coming up with new ideas. And I thought maybe that I would study architecture when I went to college, but I ended up in the chemical engineering path instead.
And has your job ever caused high stress, such as too much work or peer pressure?
Um, yeah, I mean, there are times when you have a deadline in engineering in particular where, you work long hours to try to get something done, and you're expected to have an answer for a problem by the end of the week, and you're not even sure how to do it and what where to get help you need and who to collaborate with. And that's why you work with teams and you try to have partners in what you're doing. Um, so yeah, I mean, engineering can be a very high stress job. I would say probably being a council member is even more high stress because the people that you represent and work for get very upset if their community isn't things aren't going as well as they want it to be in their community. If there's a problem in their park or in the streets, or if there's homelessness, my office here is a lot of angry people all the time. I joke about this job that I'm in now that it's the only job where the people you work for want to fire you all the time because then you're not fixing their community fast enough. So there's a lot of stress there. But engineering is high stress that, in order for a company in technology to survive. You have to release new products every year, and you have to have new generations of your computer. I mean, think about it. The iPhone every year has a new version that comes out, and your computers always have new versions every year. There's pressure on all these companies to create new products year after year after year, and there's it's fast paced and constantly moving and constantly changing. And if you don't succeed, the other company that invents something new will pass you and put you out of business. And there's all kinds of stories about companies that were the leader that disappeared. Um, that didn't innovate enough, that didn't come up with new products fast enough.
Yeah, I can imagine that would be really stressful.
Yeah.
Have you ever had some kind of hardship that took you a long time to find a solution? Any problems that you faced in your job specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of a specific example. It's hard to remember specific examples. I mean, that's kind of the nature of the work, is that you're always trying to answer a problem and come up with answers. And often I was working on advanced, difficult problems that would come back year after year with the same questions over and over again. How do you make this reactor for semiconductors better and more and higher quality, more uniform, more repeatable results? I worked on several things when I was at Clorox that I never came up with answers to. They would put me on assignments for something that they hoped that they would have come up with, we would get an answer to, but we never was able to get an answer to. Like the one I talked about, there used to be a product that people used where they would throw a tablet in the back of the toilet, and that tablet would release bleach every time you flushed, and and that would clean your toilet every time you flush. But people didn't like the fact that their bathroom smelled like bleach all the time. So they wanted to come up with a way to have a toilet bowl tablet with bleach that smelled better. But if for many things, fragrances that smell good, when they react with bleach, actually release poisonous gases. And so I had to work in a lab in a protected way to try to come up with something that would make a good smelling toilet bowl tablet. And I spent a year working on that project and never got an answer, and we never and were able to release any product. So, there's frustration, but sometimes those really challenging problems are the most interesting.
Yeah, that does sound really interesting. And this is another question I found really interesting as well. As someone with a chemical engineering background, what is your opinion on current environmental policies?
Um, well, I mean, I'm known in San Jose as being the council member who's the leader on uh, climate change policy for the city. I'm pushing the city to be carbon neutral in the next by the end of this decade, and it's very challenging, but it's the right thing to do. Um, you know, Climate change is a real problem, and many people deny it. It's very difficult to solve because everybody likes their lifestyle and doesn't want to change. But I'm focused on trying to get everybody to shift to electrification away from I mentioned petroleum and gas before, but we need to shut down that industry and stop extracting gas, fossil fuels from our planet. Um, the and it's a good point because this is completely chemistry driven process. The release of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere traps heat and causes our Earth to warm, as you might have heard, and we need to reduce our release of CO2 and methane into the atmosphere, which is causing us to heat up our planet. And, unfortunately, we're not moving fast enough, and we're going to have to come up with other solutions in the future to figure out how to live in a hotter world. Because, even as we know what we have to, scientists know what we have to do, changing people's behavior, changing economies that depend on certain industries is really, really hard. And that's frustrating to me because I know that there's answers out there, but people um, getting change to happen is really difficult. And so I'm hopeful that we will continue to make some progress. We need more, um, convert more of our systems to solar and wind power, and that we can do it. And what I know is that there's enough energy hitting the earth just from the sun to create enough electricity to power the entire earth for a year, just in 5 minutes. Enough sun in 5 minutes hits the earth that if it were all captured, it would create enough electricity to power the earth for a year. We wouldn't need any more gas. We wouldn't need any more coal. We could just use sun. Now, we're not going to cover the whole earth in solar panels, but there's a lot more we can do to convert to green energy and away from dirty energy.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, and I think most of us in here also share your worries with
Yeah.
climate change.
And I
Um,
know it's particularly um, difficult and stressful for your generation because you're going to have to live with it longer. And so hopefully we'll continue to make progress, um, and your generation will be part of the solution.
yeah, hopefully, it's definitely things we are thinking about. What kind of math do you usually use in chemical engineering?
I mean, it's it's primarily calculus. I mean, obviously people use algebra every day because you're doing calculations and math and you're solving for variables. Um, but calculus is the primary driver of natural systems on the earth. Um, so um, understanding how to take to express what's happening in a natural system in an equation form, and then using calculus to solve that equation is pretty much the basis of all the science. So, you have to be, don't have to take calculus in high school, but many of you will, and then you'll move on and take, multi-level calculus and take more advanced types of calculus to understand differential equations and things that actually um, drive scientific discovery.
Yeah, and how harsh was schooling to become a chemical engineer? How long did you have to attend college for?
Well, you can spend 4 years getting an engineering degree and get a pretty good job in chemical engineering or any engineering field. So, I mean, it's a 4-year college experience. I mean, obviously, as I said before, challenging classes. You're taking physics and chemistry and high level math and um, technical specific classes related to your engineering field. Um, it's difficult, it's challenging, but it's certainly doable. It's one of the best. I see the next question about finding a job. I mean, you can then finish that and end up with a pretty good job out of college. And chemical engineering is pretty high paying jobs, when you start. So there's a lot of opportunity. There are so many places you can work in environmental fields, understanding um, natural systems and how to deal with carbon dioxide in our atmosphere and create recycling systems and even the water treatment and how to purify water for use in the community. That's all chemical engineering. There's jobs in electronics and semiconductors. There's jobs in household products and in other kinds of chemicals. And almost everything you use has some chemistry involved, and there's probably a chemical engineer working on that.
Yeah, it does seem like a pretty broad field, but on the note of working, how are the working hours in chemical engineering? Is like a good work-life balance?
It depends. I mean, different jobs have different balances. I mean, I found it by the end of my career in engineering, I had a pretty good balance. I mean, I was able to do my work, mostly during the day, 5 days a week. But there are times when, you're in these crunch times and you have to work on the weekends and nights. And if you're working in a really um, challenging technical field, as I mentioned before, having to have new products out every year leads to a lot of long hours. So it really depends on the company, depends on the work you're doing. Um, it depends on whether how much travel is involved, because if you work for a company that has offices in different places around the world, you might have to travel to those places. So it really depends.
Yeah, and one of the last questions that we'll take is, do you think the new generation's trends are shifting the political and environmental ideas?
I hope so. Um, I believe so. I wish that more um, people in the new generation were engaged and paying attention and pushing for the things that they want, because I think that they know what's best and that they are thoughtful and prepared. But it often takes until people are older before they engage, and that's what often leads to change being slower than it should be. Um, so I hope so, but I'm obviously, a little bit concerned based on what I'm hearing about the new administration that's going to be coming, and how they really just want to keep doing the old way of doing things and don't want to invest in a clean environment. But it'll be up to all of us to advocate for the things that are important to us.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think that's pretty much the last few questions that we have. If anyone else has any last minute questions, you can type them in.
I appreciate the time. It's fun to talk about that field. It's been now 4 years since I worked in chemical engineering, but it was definitely an interesting thing to do, and a worthwhile career. I'll just say the one other thing, engineering by itself is more than just science and math classes. It really, engineering teaches you to think and solve problems. That's the primary, um, uh, the fundamental skill is problem solving and being thoughtful and thinking deeply. And to the question that just posted up here, why did I become a politician? There's a lot of problems in public life and in government that also require deep thinking, or also are better served by people who have the skills of engineering to be able to think through problems in a deep way. So so I think that skill is transferable and important.
That is a really noble cause. And on that note, thank you, Mr. Cohen, for being with us today for this guest speaker talk.
Thank
And
you.
thank you everyone for attending.
All right, we'll be in touch.
Thank you.
All right, bye.